Hello and welcome to the Rotary Time Show, a public service program presented by Rotary District 7610. Funding for this program is made possible by the generosity of Rotary District 7610, Virginia. On our program, we speak with Rotarians and community leaders to discuss how Rotary International builds partnerships to support local, national, and world communities. I am your host, D.G. Paparowski from Rotary District 7610, Virginia. Today, we want to learn more about what a leader of any size organization, club, or team should know and be able to do to ensure that the health, safety, and emotional well-being of others are protected. Joining me today remotely to discuss this important topic is Samantha Russell-Porte, a psychology therapist here in the Northern Virginia region. Well, welcome, Samantha. How are you today?
Hi, I'm well, thank you. How are you?
Oh, thank you so much for being with us. Certainly, so much has come about with people's not only physical well-being, but definitely their emotional well-being in this time of COVID. But before we get to that, tell us a little bit about your background and how you came to deciding this as a profession.
Absolutely. My name is Samantha Russell-Porte. I am a resident marriage and family therapist in the state of Virginia. I work at two locations. I work at a nonprofit in Vienna, and I work at a private practice where the office is located in Haymarket, but we see clients remotely. How I got here, I studied psychology in undergrad and always really enjoyed the application parts of it and learned that you can do that for a living. And so then I decided to go to grad school for marriage and family therapy, and here I am.
Well, thank you so much. Let's talk a little bit about, because you're relatively new to the practice, and tell us a little bit about what was typical in your practice prior to COVID.
Absolutely. So in my practice, I work with individuals, couples, and families. I focus a lot on relational clients and teens and young adults. So I saw a lot of life transitions, a lot of communication, particularly with my couples. As the pandemic started to roll through, none of it really changed necessarily, but it did increase because we were living very, very differently than we were.
Sure.
At first, it might have been communication because we are passing like ships through the night. Now it's communication because we are literally living on top of each other and there was nowhere else to go and I'm sick of this person. So it's really learning how to adjust to that.
Right. And was your practice primarily literally physically seeing your patients and dealing with them in an office environment?
So I was in person. So the biggest transition was switching over to telehealth, which was, I think, a transition for everybody. I had a little bit of practice right before the pandemic hit, but not to the degree of seeing all of my clients on telehealth.
So very much like our Rotary clubs who really weren't using the video technology before, and then were thrust into that. Everybody, teachers, therapists, it doesn't really matter, working people, everybody's had to learn how to deal with it and how to use it effectively. So coming into the pandemic, how did you see some differences beginning, and were there changes as that pandemic and lockdown continued further?
Absolutely. I think initially all of us were in a state of, well, what's going on? is it going to last very long? So there was a bit of, okay, I should pay attention, I should know what's going on. However, it's not going to be for forever. And then the more serious it got, we all had to readjust our lives. It started as, I think it was a 2 week quarantine that everybody had to do, and obviously it lasted a lot longer than that.
Sure.
So it was a lot of adjustment and a lot of being able to be flexible and constantly learning and adapting, and just getting comfortable in that. And I think that was a challenge for everybody, especially when you have a routine of things and that routine is broken for something that is absolutely outside of your control. So I think that was, if I had to summarize it, that's how I would summarize it.
Right. And did you see differences? Because, as Rotarians, we not only have a large breadth of people that are Rotarians, but we deal with kids in high school, we deal with college, we deal with young professionals, we deal with working adults, recently retired, and of course some of our older. So could you identify what are some of the things all of those generations, if you will, had in common, and what are some of the significant differences you see among those groups?
Absolutely. I think one of the most common trends was, I'll use the word isolation and separation, because everybody likes to see friends, everybody likes to, go out and enjoy whatever it is that they enjoy, restaurants, museums, and all of that. Those who are retired or those who have outdoor activities or weekly activities that they enjoy doing with others, all of that was taken away. And it doesn't matter if you're a 5-year-old or a 95-year-old, that hit everybody. I think one of the differences in that, though, is how it was addressed with each generation. Younger generations, for example, are very, very tech savvy. So it's, oh, I can't physically see my friend, I'll call them on FaceTime, or we'll be on Skype or Instagram or whatever social media platform here. Some older generations, or some people in general, aren't as tech savvy. So that was something that they had to learn. And sometimes when you're having to learn new technologies, as we were discussing before, it can be a little bit of a hassle and a headache. And it's on the assumption that other people also know how to use that technology, right? So while there were definitely similarities in what everybody was going through, how that could be addressed varied, dependent on age, dependent on technological savvy, dependent on resources and availability. If you have access to computer or Wi-Fi connection regularly or not, and location. If you're in a place where there is a lot of outside space and you can have those outdoor distant activities, then okay. But if you don't have access to that, that continues to leave you in a remote and isolated situation.
Yeah, I think when we had talked earlier, your comment about nobody's gone through this, so nobody has the roadmap, nobody has the textbook, and we're kind of all fumbling along as we've gone through this. And one thing, if I could just ask you, what is one thing that you've learned? I know you've talked about telehealth, and how have you managed that?
Slowly. Slowly. It was definitely an adjustment. I think the main adjustment for me, outside of learning how to use this particular system that I use, is translating what I do in person on screen. because a lot of what I do in person is nonverbal. It's how I'm
Right.
sitting, it's how my client is sitting, it's, facial expressions and all of that. And some of that can read through a computer and some of it can't. I don't have control if it's raining outside or if it's storming and the Wi-Fi knocks out for everybody, or if the other person doesn't have a strong connection. So navigating those nuances was one of the main challenges for me. However, it turned out to be okay because all of us are going through this. And so my clients and I were kind of able to joke a little about it. Like, oh,
Sure.
okay, Wi-Fi's down today. All right. It's not cooperating. Clearly it doesn't want us to do therapy. And we would just joke about it because what else could you do about it? You can't get
Sure.
frustrated. Just make
Absolutely.
it work.
Absolutely. And I think eventually when we get back, we're going to take a short break in just a minute. But when you get back, I mean, some of these things that you have just outlined in your personal experience are things that we as Rotarians have gone through with our clubs. And I think how we carry those through to what will be, as we say, the new reality is what we're going to start talking about when we come back. Well, right now we're going to take a short break and be right back and learn more from Samantha Russell-Porte. Please stay with us.
We've been here before, fighting the problems that fight back, because we see opportunities where others see obstacles. We're change makers and problem solvers, uniting over 1 million minds to address complex issues facing communities around the world, including yours. We're working together as partners and professionals, while making friendships that last a lifetime. We're Rotary, and there's no limit to what we can do.
Well, welcome back to the Rotary Times. We are here with Samantha Russell-Porte, a local psychology therapist who is helping us understand what a leader should know and be able to do to lead during times of uncertainty. Well, Samantha, we left off with the kinds of things that you learned with teleporting for counseling over the internet and Zooming. So a couple of things we want to talk about now, and that is, what have you seen as we've kind of gone through? We understand people's emotions are not consistent. It's not like, oh, today I've solved it all, it's clear sailing the rest of the way. And what are some of the struggles that you see carrying over as the society begins to open up, but we still have to address COVID precautions?
Absolutely. One of the things when COVID first started was such a quick shift to we have to be indoors, we can't go outside, you have to wear a mask, and a very, very swift change to something completely different. Now that I won't say we're totally on the other side, but we're
Right.
closer to that middle end, if you will, is adjusting to going back and what that looks like, and addressing what I've started to call COVID anxiety about what's okay, what's not okay. Am I comfortable being in indoor spaces versus outdoor spaces? Am I comfortable with large groups or small groups? For people who have had children in the pandemic or who have had COVID or who are immune compromised, figuring out how we socialize in person again. Yes, restaurants are open, venues are open, the world is opening back up, as they say. However, we're the ones who are having to figure out, okay, but what am I now comfortable with? We're thinking about that in a very different way. We're very, very conscious of it. Whereas 2 years ago, it might have just been, oh, I'm going to a concert, oh, I'm going to a restaurant, oh, I'm going wherever. There wasn't that second thought of, okay, but what if there's a COVID exposure?
Well, and thank you for pointing that out. A friend of mine hadn't traveled for business for 18 months. And I know she had to go back to start flying again for business. And she was talking to me and she goes, I don't know if I'm ready. I don't know is what she kept saying. And I think just as we went into COVID and didn't know, coming out of this sort of in this haphazard thing, we also don't know. What are some of the checks that we personally should do with ourselves in terms of looking at situations?
Absolutely. I think, I mean, even to your friend's point, when I traveled over the summer, first time since the pandemic, I would joke and say, I don't know how to fly anymore. I'm very comfortable flying, but it was very uncomfortable of, okay, well, how do I do this? How do I do that? What are they doing in the state that I was going? What's going on over there?
Right.
And just having a totally different awareness when you're traveling. I think one of the most important things to be aware of is just do a little self-assessment. Just take a little bit of time if you're getting ready or as you're getting ready to go somewhere, and think about, okay, am I okay with this? And sit with that. If you are okay with it, great. Obviously use the precautions that we have available to us, but great, enjoy that. If you're not, that's okay too. You don't want to rush because that will put you in an uncomfortable scenario and not help with that anxiety. And maybe you can think about, well, what are some other options? If it's indoor, maybe ask if it could be outdoor, or ask if it could be virtual, or send your regards in any type of way. But I really think right now it's really, really important for all of us to have a little patience with ourselves as we readjust to the world as it is now.
Right. We kind of say in Rotary that there were kind of two speeds. One was, yay, everything's open, I want to do everything, and a rush to that.
Right.
And then another group saying, yay, everything's opening, and want to rush to it, and then go, oh my God, I'm so exhausted. I feel like I've been, holding my breath for 15 months. So your point about having patient, number one, self-awareness and the patience with ourselves to understand it's still a process coming out. What would you say to clubs and employers and team people? How should they, as a team leader, as a club leader, as the president of an organization, approach this reintegration of your workforce or your club people?
That's a really good question. I would say also be patient and try to talk with your employees and your club members, see what they're comfortable with, and see how you can try to meet those needs. Obviously, you can't meet everybody's needs. That's not possible pre-pandemic, post-pandemic ever. But you can do the best that you can. If you're getting the read that most people aren't comfortable coming to an in-person meeting right now, but some are, offer maybe a hybrid option so that those who want to come can. Obviously, again, social distance practices, masks, all of that, but also have the virtual option available so that those who aren't necessarily comfortable coming but do want to still be active in your club or with work and all of that, they can still do that. And they don't feel as though they're being left out or excluded.
Well, some of the things that you did to be more successful in telehealth and teletherapy, and you were saying, the difficulty of reading cues. I think that's one of the biggest complaints we get from our people. It's so impersonal, etc. How do you, as a leader, begin to engage the people both in the physical meeting and your hybrid attendees? I think the biggest problem right now with hybrid is that the clubs stick a computer up and they talk to the people in the room and they forget about the people on the computer. but how do you engage them?
How do I engage them in a hybrid situation?
Well, across video conferencing.
Okay. I use a lot of humor in my work. So just kind of joking about how uncomfortable or awkward or, oh my gosh, we're still doing this. And that tends to keep that, what would you call it? That kind of, I guess, connection there.
Right.
Number one. Number two, something that we actually do in our group supervision is we'll have kind of contest of who can have the funniest Zoom background or themed Zoom background or whatever the case is. And it's fun, it's engaging, and it's using the technology that we have. It's using what we have. We can't do it in person necessarily, but you can change your background. Or we had our holiday party last year over Zoom, and everyone had to dress up. So we were in sweaters, we were in hats, we were doing all of that. So it definitely looks different. And I'll be honest, sometimes I felt a little silly being in this really crazy holiday sweater and headband and all of that. But when you're doing it with other people, there's that, that feeling of what it would be like in person. I'm with people that I care about. I'm with people that I enjoy having conversation and communication with, and we're doing this together. So no, I'm not with you in person, but I still am getting that feeling with the limitations that are there.
So what would be the 3 leading things that you would tell everyone they should do for their own personal mental health well-being? And then what would you advise Rotary Club leaders to think about when they're dealing with the variety of club members, the variety of service projects, high school, college kids? What would be 3 things that they need to keep in mind as the head of a group?
Interestingly, I think I would say the same 3 things to both scenarios. I would say, number 1, be patient with yourself. Number 2, be patient with others, whomever those others are, your colleagues, your employees, your students, your other club members. And number 3, be as flexible and as adaptable as you can. There was no rule book on how to deal with the pandemic. My colleagues and I will joke that we don't cover pandemics in therapy school. So we all are trying to figure this out as best we can. And in doing so, I found that the more patient I am with myself in the learning process compared to berating myself or constant critique of myself, the more likely I am to figure it out and for it to stick long term. So if I'm giving that to myself, I then would want to extend that to another person who is also dealing with their own challenges. Some might be similar to mine, and others I might not have any idea about. So want to extend that patience and that grace both ways. And when you're doing that, you learn, okay, so if I can't do it this way, let me figure out another way. And
Correct.
That's where that flexibility and adaptability comes in.
Right, absolutely. And just as you will probably be including teletherapy in your practice going forward, even when there isn't a pandemic, I think we've learned things and have begun at least to learn, maybe not mastered yet, but have gotten pretty good in the hybrid and the video conferencing. And these are the kinds of things that we have to bring forward.
Absolutely, I agree with that. In fact, the private practice that I work for, it's called Group Therapy Associates. We are transitioned to telework in regards to being an option for therapy. We have 2 in-person offices, one in Haymarket, Virginia, and one in Washington, D.C. And now we're offering the telehealth one for those who maybe aren't close to an office but still want access to therapy services. And so being able to now have this skill is super helpful, because
Yes.
that means that we're able to help other people and more people who might have not been able to have that option because of transportation reasons or because of health reasons,
Right.
or they might have broken a foot and, can't make session that day, but they can do it from home.
Well, thank you so much. Clearly, be kind to ourselves, be patient with others, embrace everybody's differences, and use technology to the advantage to be able to mix it up. Well,
And self-care.
And
oh my
self-care.
goodness. Self-care, self-care, self-care.
Well, Samantha,
important.
thank you so much for today. We really appreciate it, and I hope our clubs were taking notes. Funding.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you so much. Funding for this program is made possible by the generosity of Rotary District 7610, Virginia. For the Rotary Times program, I am your host, DG Patricia Borowski from the Rotary District 7610, Virginia. You are welcome to join us at a Rotary Club meeting in your area for breakfast, lunch, or dinner, or even a service project. You can find us in a club near you by looking us up on the internet. Many clubs are hosting meetings virtually and in hybrid format. You only need to look us up to find out the details. Remember, our time is your time, and together it is time well spent. Please come and join us for our next program as we continue to celebrate Rotary's 116 years of service above self.